Hey everybody, what's going on? It's the Spiral Podcast, and today I'm going to be talking about one thing that would make college football way better. College football is obviously a great sport, but I think that there's one change right now that could be made that would make the sport so much better and enjoyable for the fans and players. And so I just want to start off with what it is. So I think the AP poll is something that, it's kind of been an issue for a while, but I think people are finally starting to realize that it's way more annoying and inefficient and just bad than like in previous seasons. So today I'm just gonna go over some problems that I think it has and how I would fix it if I was the commissioner of college football and could do that. So the first problem I have with it is that I think the preseason rankings matter way too much, which is a bad thing. So I think teams, going into the preseason or going into the season, you don't really know how each team is going to perform. You don't know, if Alabama's going to be elite again or if they're just going to be like a mid team. And the preseason rankings, I feel like they leave the AP, AP voters feel like, I mean, you know, Clemson was ranked at number 4 to start the season. So we can't drop them down too far because they're still a top 5 team. And if we move them too far, that would make it seem like we were wrong. So we just have to drop them a little bit. And then they lose to Georgia Tech, and now it's like, all right, I guess we have to drop them out. Um, Whereas like once they lost to LSU or whatever, they should have dropped way farther because they didn't play that great. And then Georgia Tech, I mean, yeah, they just easily should be unranked. But yeah, that's just one example. That was not like a super extreme example, but you know what I'm saying. And then Notre Dame is a great example. They started in the top 10. They were a top 10 team coming into the season, and they lost to Miami at Miami by like less than a score. So they were like, yeah, we'll just drop them a little bit, but they just have one quality loss, which I'm fine with. They should drop, but they shouldn't drop that far. And then they lose to Texas A&M at home after having a lot of time to prepare, and they are still ranked. So the AP committee, they saw Notre Dame was at 0-2, and I mean they haven't won a game yet, but they're still a top 25 team because they were ranked in the top 10 or like top 8. So they can't drop them out because they feel like they're still one of the best teams. So pretty much the preseason, it just matters way too much. I think they really need to fix that because it just messes up all the voting for the future, and it just makes no sense really. Um, with future rankings and their inability to move them. So the second thing that I think is a problem is that the voters are very inconsistent sometimes. Um, I think it's fair to say that every AP voter has at least some sort of bias. And I know that each school is supposed to be represented by at least one AP voter. So technically there's not like mega bias, but SEC bias is undeniable. And I'm not saying that the SEC isn't the best conference or it is the best conference. I'm just saying that the AP poll really likes to favor SEC teams when it comes to ranking. And I just think, when it comes to like Big Ten and SEC schools, there's just more bias towards them because they're bigger. They have bigger markets, bigger fan bases, all that stuff. And I don't know if it's because maybe they are the best teams, but it seems like a lot of times those teams just get overranked and then overrated in general. Like Alabama is a huge case of that. Last year they lost to Vanderbilt, and people were still trying to put them in the playoffs, which I know that's the different ranking, but it was heavily influenced off of the AP poll. So, um, it seems like it's not that big of a deal, but once the college football committee or college football playoff committee starts looking at these rankings, it heavily impacts them, whether you want to say it does or not. And I think there's always going to be a bias. So you got to make sure that the rankings are actually accurate, or else it's just going to mess up the whole playoffs. And I don't know, I just think that the voters are inconsistent at times and have a little bit too much bias. And so how I would fix these issues is number one, I would say just don't have an AP poll for the first like 3 or 4 weeks. I would let non-conference happen, and then going into conference play is when I would create a poll. I think for a team like Notre Dame, they'd probably be unranked right now because they have 2 losses, but that doesn't mean they could still not climb their way back in. But I feel like it would take away the feeling of, the AP voters not being able to adjust where teams are at just because of their preseason rankings, which I feel like uh, it definitely needs to change because I just think that their inability to let teams move and jump and move around just based off preseason is like a huge issue that definitely needs to be fixed. Um, and then the second way I would fix it is I would let each team rise and fall based on how they play each week. So what I mean by that is that each team shouldn't necessarily stay above a team. Uh, like so if there's a team that's above, let's say there's a 9 and 10 team, and the 9 team wins their game against like a non-conference cupcake, whatever, and then there's a 10 team that you know, just beat a top ranked team or something, or like a ranked team, but they both won. So, the AP poll won't really adjust it so that the team that has a better win is going to move up. Essentially, I feel like the AP poll is scared to make huge adjustments. I think every week, no team should be secured. Like, if Ohio State, for example, is number one and they win, that doesn't mean they should necessarily be in one. I think that having some flexibility and ranking them based on how they've played and performed is much better than just keeping them based on where they were the week before and then just adjusting that way. I think it should be every week a new reset and they rank the best teams, not just where they were last week and then adjust accordingly. I think that would make it way more accurate, and yeah, I just think it would make it way better. And then the final thing I have is that I think that AP voters should be giving at least some sort of explanation why they rank each team 1 through 25. Like, I know that this would take a while. I know that it's very inconvenient, but the rankings could come out a day or two later, so that each voter would have time to, even if it's just like a sentence, and then you could go to AP's website and like look at what the most commonly said things were for each team, because I feel like this would just let the college football fans like us, see their thought process and how they're working, and I think it would make them have to elaborate and think a little bit harder on why they are voting teams there. And then once hopefully the college football fan base could like criticize them and see what they were doing right and wrong, and then they could adjust accordingly. So it would take a lot of time. It would be quite annoying for them, but I think in the long run it would help out college football a lot. I think it would make the rankings way better, way more accurate, and I think fans would like it because they'd be able to see what their thought process is when voting. And then I think that the AP voters probably won't like it. I'm not saying they will, but I think it would make it way more accurate. They'd be able to think about their votes a little bit more, and then the public could benefit. So I think that would be a great fix. But the AP poll is it's really not in the best spot right now. Especially this year, it's pretty easy to see a lot of injustices and wrong moves that they've made already, and it's only 3 weeks in now. And yeah, I just think AP poll needs fixed, and I think that it would be beneficial to fix it, and it would make college football a lot better. So if I could make one change right now, that is what I would make. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about the AP poll, because I feel like most people would agree with that. I just feel like everybody to some extent doesn't like the AP poll, so just let me know down in the comments. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you made it all the way to the end of the podcast, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.